attention to that, yeah.
Carl Nelson, September 23rd.
If you do not understand white supremacy, what it is, and how it works, everything else that you do understand will confuse you. In all of these 9 areas of activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Anywhere on the planet, minute by minute, day by day, all of the time, all of the time, all of the time.
Good morning, and welcome to the September the 21st edition of the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr., and I am the co-host, Mr. Bobby. Thank you again for listening all over the world. And let me give you the number that you can get in and get a question asked and maybe a BGQ. That number is simply 516-453-9921. Again, 516-453-9921. You could also Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, B-O-B-B-Y, @gmail.com. And the chat room is available for you to get on and get into some interesting conversations. So you can do that. Let me say this. Before the show, we have a mic check to make sure that Mr. Fuller and I are proper, that you can hear us. And one of the things that was mentioned was about the Carl Nelson show. Mr. Fuller, would you go ahead and repeat that announcement that you had given to me that we were going to make in the show concerning the Carl Nelson show?
The Carl Nelson show, I'll be on Thursday, September 23rd. That's the day after tomorrow. Eastern Standard Time from 5 to 7. That's radio, WOL radio, 1450 AM on your dial, and 95.9 FM. That's WOL, 1450 AM radio, and 95.9 FM radio. Thursday, September 23rd. Day after tomorrow. This is Tuesday.
Okay.
That's the Carl Nelson show, and it'll be 2 hours long, and it'll be the usual questions and answers, and that's the way the show will go, somewhat with the same format that we have here on ProduceJustice.com.
Yes. I was just given some information that also on Radio 1, the broadcast will be on that, and also you can hear it on ProduceJustice.com, the replay of that. Okay. Mr. Fuller, let me start off by saying good morning to you, and how are you doing?
Good morning. I'm still learning.
All right. And what are you still learning, Mr. Fuller?
I'm still learning about, really, and I'm learning less and less. More and more about less and less, I might put it that way, because right now there's so much chaos that I'm really going into the code and fingering through it myself and trying to figure out what's the best approaches to make out of all of the approaches to make to this dilemma. We're just going around in this never-ending circle. And like the old spiritual song says, the gospel song, each rung goes higher and higher. But I don't know if that's true where black people and white people are concerned, and all people really on the planet. Where are we going? What are we supposed to be doing? And how are we supposed to be best interacting with each other each and every day? And just seems like there's agony and agony and agony everywhere, endless. And, well, I say it seems like, but it actually is. Just more and more agony. A lady at a bank asked me about 7 years ago where did I think things were headed. And even then, I said, well, I think you better tighten your belt, whatever you do. And don't start throwing money away or anything like that. Hold on to every cent that you can. And don't spend foolishly. That's to start off with. I said, because everything is going to be so uncertain. You think that you're doing pretty well today, and in just a couple of weeks, you can have complete disaster. I mean, everything in your existence might be hinging on just what happens in just a few days. I mean, everything can unwind very rapidly. And one thing that is happening to thousands and thousands and thousands of people right now that we're witnessing, dislocation for all kinds of reasons. Climate changes, gangs running rampart, the ramifications from racism, and not only racism, from just the environment and everything else. All the people who are down there under those bridges and at the Texas border, and who are from Haiti, and you see these photographs in the newspapers. You see it on television, and then you turn the page or turn the channel, and it's the same thing somewhere else, and then somewhere else, and then somewhere else. You see dark-skinned people, babies in their arms. Which way did the white people go? And so it comes down to what do you do? It always comes down to what a person does. Each person has to prepare. And I plan, getting back to what I told the lady at the bank when she asked me about the chaos and whatnot, and what suggestions would I make. I say I'm making the same suggestions to everybody that I'm making for myself. First of all, be prepared to move quickly, because you don't know what's going to happen. Your condominium or wherever you are, and you think you're riding high, I mean, the next thing you know, it's collapsing on you, and you're buried under a bunch of rubble. Or you're somewhere that you think is safe, and a hurricane comes up, or a volcano, and more earthquakes. I mean, coming around one time, and you say, well, that's that, and I'm kind of halfway getting back on my feet. Next thing you know, the very next week or the next month, a bigger earthquake, and then a bigger one. Then tornadoes come through, and then the river dries up, and then next thing you know, it starts raining somewhere. It just keeps raining. It doesn't stop. And you start seeing water where you haven't seen it before. What does that mean? You're going to have to be prepared to move. So don't start accumulating a bunch of stuff like you're going to be permanently situated. It's not likely to happen if you're a person, particularly with dark skin. It's happening to a lot of white people. And so some of them will try to help you. Many of them will try to help. And then a lot of them are not in position to help anybody but themselves. And then, but since we are in the system of white supremacy, when anything goes wrong that we can't handle, when we get in the midst of us killing each other, and then here comes a flood right in the middle of us killing each other, all of a sudden the neighborhood, got cars swimming down the street. Everybody's on top of their cars, either the people who were killing each other just 2 days ago. Now they're all trying to scramble and get on top of a car, and they're all there together. some of them with their guns still in their belts, but they're on top of a car with the person that they were going to kill 3 days ago. They were looking for them. But now both of them on top of a car, stranded, looking up at the sky, saying, please help. Somebody help. Somebody's coming, you know. I mean, I'm in a Russian stream. See, something happened that you didn't expect at all. You're all permanently set to get these gang wars for next year and the year after that and the year after that and the year after that. The earthquake comes and everybody's house is down. Everybody's walking around looking for food. People eating little scraps of this, that, and the other, or whatever they can find up under the rubble. So these are the times we're in now. There's no telling. It might be. It's just going to keep going in this direction. It seems like it is. Particularly the climatologists, whomever, whatever you want to call the name of the people the names of the people, the titles, who predict all kinds of disastrous natural events, quote unquote. So these things are intervening and interrupting everybody's plans for the future. Planning on getting married, planning on going to college, planning on doing this. But the college is underwater. I mean, and you're having to move from where you are. Because now the landlords, I mean, that's their business. They're saying, hey, and you're behind on your house note because you haven't been working. COVID-19. Now they're moving you out. You wasn't thinking about this 3 years ago. Had all kinds of plans for the future. Now, you're being foreclosed on. And say, I've been paying for this house for about 15 years. I'm getting pretty close to having it all paid for. Now I don't even have a place to stay. And I got to go and find a bridge to be under. That's happening. It's happening to a lot of people in a lot of places. Or the water's poisoned where you are. And you're going to have to move. In this building where you are, on account of something that happened, inspectors come around. You thought you were permanently situated in this apartment. No. Everybody in this neighborhood's going to have to move now. I mean, because we found something under the ground. I mean, that's, that, hey, you can't stay here. In another 5 years, all these buildings are going to start sinking. And somebody didn't calculate that. So, bottom line, codification. For the immediate future, be prepared to move with very short notice. Very short notice. Sometimes just a few hours. Everything that you've worked for, everything that you've looked forward to is down the drain. You're going to have to make whole new plans for your entire existence in about the next 48 hours. Start thinking along those lines. And while you're at it, try to think about helping somebody who needs help the most, starting with yourself, because you can't help somebody else if you can't help yourself. And stop all these little bickerings about a whole lot of nothing. Most of the stuff that we're all excited about doing can be postponed, and we should be 100% serious about everything. Like in that scene in Saving Private Ryan, when the sniper asked the captain, or rather made a statement to the captain, Captain, this mission that you're having us on now, that's not really our primary mission, but it's a diversionary mission. I mean, and some of us may get real serious or hurt or killed. And so I don't feel good about this. And the captain of that unit responded to him. And that's one of the lessons I say is in the movie that I have on the movie list. The response was, when was the last time you felt good about anything? He put it in the form of a question. When is the last time you felt good about anything? You're in a war behind enemy lines. And we don't really know too much about where we are or what we're supposed to be doing, except what we're supposed to be doing originally started out to be one thing and turned out to be something else, where a bunch of us just might be dead in the next 5 minutes. So when is the last time you felt good about anything? You've been through a whole lot already, and you're going to have to be going through a whole lot for the foreseeable future. That's very, very dangerous, and nothing pleasant about none of it. When is the last time you felt good about anything? So what's the message here? Black people got to get out of this notion, I got to feel good. Forget about feeling good. You better be thinking about surviving. And where are you going to be in the next 10 years? At the top of the next 10 years, where are you going to be? And what are you going to be doing? And what can you absolutely rely on right now that you absolutely know, hey, I'm set. I'm set for the next 15, 20 years. I know that. How many black people can say that? So tighten your seatbelts.
Thoughts and expressions from the mind of Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr., still learning. From the chat room, still learning, number 2 says this. Question of the day from the area of labor. What is the best practice to make a report in the workplace about unjust treatment? In the wake of COVID-19 mandates, there may be a lot of injustices in the workplace. What should be the most constructive codified response, Mr. Fuller?
Always go to page 171, 172 of the textbook for victims of white supremacy. That's what I keep recommending. Because first of all, I recommend that for myself. Those 4 questions. They'll always take everybody right where they should be. Not where you want to be necessarily, but considering your circumstances, where you should be. The best of your options. We're getting fewer and fewer options now, it seems. Everybody, everywhere, about what the next moments are going to be. So what are those 4 questions? What do I want to do? Because every creature wants to do something. Why do I want to do it? How do I plan to do it? And what do I expect the constructive results to be? Wake up every morning and go to bed every night asking yourself, starting with those 4 questions. What do I want to do? Be very focused on what you want to do. Just don't let your mind just ramble all over the place. Well, I'm going to do something. What do you want to do specifically? Why do you want to do it? How do you plan to do it? And most people don't have a plan for anything, really, particularly black people, because we always depend on somebody else to make plans for us, usually somebody white. That's how we were raised. And what do I expect the constructive result to be? Now, in answer specifically to the question in the workplace, you ask those 4 questions of anybody that you're talking to in the workplace. What do you want me to do? Or you can ask them, what do you want to do? Why do you want to do it? Or why do you want me to do it? How do you plan to do it, sir or ma'am? Or how do you plan for me to do it, sir or ma'am? And then the clincher question, the roundup question. What do you expect the constructive result to be of what is wanted here in this workplace? Everybody wants something. Every place where you are, every place where every creature is, whether it's a squirrel or a bird, that bird wants something every second. It suddenly changes direction. You look at a bird in the air, and it changes direction. Why did it change direction? It was going south, and then all of a sudden, it makes a circle and going back north again. Why did the bird do that? Because it wanted to. Well, why did it want to? Because it made some type of plan. It had one plan, fly south, suddenly made another plan, fly north. For what constructive reason? For whatever reasons, birds make plans. Birds make plans. And birds want to do something. They usually have plans. I'm going south in October. Or I'm going to wait until November. Still some good pickings around here. So I'm not going in October like I did last year. They're not really thinking about October. They're just thinking about the seasons according to bird language and bird philosophy. People are no different. Everybody wants something every minute. And you change your plans. In the workplace, same thing. COVID-19 or whatever. So you just ask people, because all problems are solved through the process of what? Questions and answers.
Yes, sir.
And those questions, those 4 questions, will fit anywhere, at any time, anywhere on the planet, and applies to everybody without exception. Just think about it. I stumbled upon those 4 questions just in 2016. In my mind, they just fell in place. And I got to thinking about it, and I said, yeah, those 4 questions apply to everything, all the time, when I came up with them. And I ran it by a few people, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. I had a conversation with her, and I said, what do you think about these 4 questions? There's been the 4 most important questions that any creature, any person can ask and answer and come up with the most constructive results. And so I ran it past her, and she thought about it for just about 2 or 3 minutes after I ran through them. And she said, repeat those again? And I repeated them. And she said, oh, I'm going to use that one. I'm going to use that one. That was shortly before she passed away.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that if everybody, they're simple questions, but they're loaded, and they'll fit in your job situation. I'll almost guarantee it. And if they don't, I'm going back to the drawing board, because that's what the compensatory logic means. And full of, hey, you thought these questions and the answers to these questions are kind of like a key to something. You ain't really got nothing going for you. I mean, those questions are sloppy.
I have a quote from Dr. Welsing that I'm going to repeat that before the first hour is up. Right now, we're going to go to Darnell in New York. Darnell, we got you on now. Go ahead. Good morning, Darnell. And what is your question for Mr. Fuller?
Good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Fuller.
Good morning,
sir. Good morning, sir.
Oh, Mr. Fuller, why is it important for the victims of the system of white supremacy to always keep a mindset of learning and not ever let it feel like they know enough?
Because you never know enough. An educated person is a person that knows everything about everything, which means that you don't have any educated people in the known universe, according to compensatory logic. Now, if you ask somebody else that question, I'm quite sure you get a different answer. But an educated person is a person that knows everything about everything that needs to be known at the time and place and circumstance that it needs to be known. In other words, you are a problem solver. If you are not an educated person, I don't care what kind of school you've been to, if you don't solve problems. The whole point for learning is to be able to, quote, unquote, solve problems and solve them to produce what? In a manner that produces the most constructive result. That's what all education is supposed to be for. Not just to stand around, being eloquent. You're not a problem solver. You're not educated in anything. Unless you can show that there's some problem you can solve. That's the whole point for learning. The world is full of problems. This universe is loaded with problems. They keep coming at you. So the whole point for learning anything is to be able to solve problems and do so in a manner that will produce the most constructive results.
Yes. Before I end this first segment, let me read that quote from Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. This was sent to me by Brother James Parker. It's entitled, "Y'all Still Don't Get It." This is a direct quote from Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. "We're the only people on this entire planet who have been taught to sing and praise our demeanment. I'm a bitch. I'm a hoe. I'm a gangster. I'm a thug. I'm a dog. If you can train people to demean and degrade themselves, you can oppress them forever. You can even program them to kill themselves, and they won't even understand what happened." End of quote. That is from Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. You're listening to the Counter Racist Code Show, also called the CRCS. We are here on Blog Talk Radio, but this show is also reproduced at ProduceJustice.com, where you can go to the website and get all the information about this show and about the books that Mr. Fuller has written, which we will discuss in about 15 to 20 minutes. That's at ProduceJustice.com. We thank you for your listenership and being a loyal listener. We'll try to get to as many calls and Gmails as we can. Chat room is available. And if you want to call in, you can. Just simply dial this number, 516-453-9921. You know the drill. Press the number 1 button, and you will get in line. You can also Gmail me at the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, @gmail.com. It probably will not be read today, but you can do that anyway. And also, you can communicate in the chat room, and they are blowing up in there. Our Freedom, Be Good One, JJ's in there, JJ Killer. Dun Jenny 72 is in. Emery Lumumba, Invisible Negro, MAGA, VGQ, Produce 21, Still Learning 2, and SWA is also in there. All right, let's get back to the questions. Thank you again, Darnell. Don't be a stranger. Let's go to New York again, and Marcus. Marcus, good morning and welcome to the program. What's your question for Mr. Fuller?
Good morning. This is Marcus from Long Beach.
Oh, it has New York on here. Okay, Marcus from Long Beach. Wow. Okay, I'll take it. I'll take it. My mistake. Go ahead, Marcus.
No problem. And I'd like to stay on the line, too, as well.
Okay.
I just have a VGQ and a quick question. Mr. Fuller, my grandmother, she's 84 years old, and sometimes when I go over to her house on a weekly basis, I talk about some of the things that are discussed on this program. And one of the last things she left me with was we were talking about progress. And she said, compare the people in your guys' generation, their position, to the position that we are in now, and told me just to think about it. So that's my VGQ. And then my question is, last week on the program you said that masculine black males are lethal to the system of white supremacy, which I do believe. I'm just asking if you can put out a couple pointers and a couple viewpoints on why that is a true statement.
Because the white supremacists look at a black male who wants to be a real black male and wants to go from a boy to a man. The white supremacists said, well, it's just going to be one man on this planet, and that man is going to be white. So you are my competitor, because I don't want you to be a man. I want you to be a boy under my foot forever. Or you can be a little girl. Take your choice. But you're not going to be a man. And if you have any of the characteristics of manhood, you got to be some type of wild animal. I'll tolerate that, because I know how to chain animals. I'm a white supremacist. I tame lions. I tame elephants. I put them in the zoo and all this. I can put you in a zoo, because that's what you are, if that's what I want to turn you into. Like in the movie The Godfather 1, when the people were all around that table, and part played by Marlon Brando, the Godfather, he says, I don't want to get into this drug business because, I think that if we, as people, get into the drug business, I mean, right now we got the unions and we got the gambling, but I've always, stayed away from that drug business because there's no telling where the limits are. Next thing you know, it will affect our own families. It will come back to haunt us. So that's why I've been cautious about it. And I really don't want to get into that. And then the other people around the table said, well, yeah, but, we got to be in some kind of business. And gambling is kind of going out of style. And the unions, we don't know about the future on that and all like that. That's how we've been making our money. I say, so we're going to have to get into something. And so it looks like that's the wave of the future. And everybody's all the mobs have got to be on board with it. And we can do that right here at this table. Because, otherwise we'll just be fighting each other for nothing. Nobody's making any money. And then somebody stood up at that table, that's Godfather 1, made back in the 1970s, and said, well, we'll control the drugs. We won't have it near schools. We won't sell it to children. Said we'll sell it to the dark people. They're nothing but animals anyway. Let them lose their souls. Now, that's a fictional movie, but it made that point. Because in the early 1970s, that prophecy made in a movie was coming true. And by 1984, it had gripped black people all the way. We're slaughtering each other by the bushel everywhere. Okay? So the white supremacists make movies about what they're going to do. I'm not saying that the people connected with the movie Godfather were white supremacists. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying, but in the system of white supremacy, you get messages all the time about what the future is going to look like.
Yes.
And you get them in movies, you get them in comic books, you get them in a number of things. And so, to get back to the point, that the white supremacists are always making plans, sometimes 50, 100 years ahead of time. Black people don't have any plans for what they're going to be doing next week, except another party. That's just about it. We don't go any further than that. And that's all over the world.
Yes.
That's how we wind up under bridges, looking for a place to lay our heads. Black people all over the world. We are party people. Or
thank you.
If we're not having a party, we're thinking about planning some type of fight among ourselves. And that's our goals. Otherwise, you ask us. I mean, we had a slang saying going back in the 1970s, I remember. Said, oh, man, it's just something to do. Just something to do. Well, something like what? You're just going to do anything? Yeah, it's something to do. That's how we think. It's something to do. Just do something. Whatever it is. The white supremacists are precision people. Everything that they do is to make them stronger, not just be involved in silliness forever.
Thank you, Marcus, for your question. Thank you, Mr. Fuller, for your answer. In addition to that, Marcus, on YouTube, Dr. Welsing's speeches, many of them come from the psychiatric point of view, why we do what we do as black people, in particular, why black men wear dresses and act like females and so forth. She addresses that. Very good read, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. I'll keep you on the line there, Marcus. Okay, let's go to Houston and John. John, you're up with Mr. Fuller. What is your question, and good morning?
Good morning, gentlemen. I'm trying very hard to live up to his phrase, I'm still learning. While I was holding, I don't know if this was something that was seen by most everyone. It was a USA Today article that caught my attention while I was listening to you, gentlemen. The whitest paint in the world has supposedly just been reported in the Guinness World Book of Records that reflects 98.1% of sunlight and presumably will be pitched to try to do away with air conditioning. I don't know whether you want to respond to that or not. Just an intriguing title of an article. Whether this is a VGQ or not, I was listening to what you just said, Mr. Fuller. And again, to both of you gentlemen, kudos and thanks for the efforts that you do. Trying to be proactive and being, as you said over the past few months, the universal man and universal woman. When the concept of whiteness came to be, it required the connotation of blackness, and I think that's what's confusing to what I'm hearing from most of my people, what I consider my people, how we have been castigated, denigrated, and characterized from the N-word to Negro, which is actually the term that was used by the European invaders and settlers, primarily of Spanish origin, Negro meaning dark, or in the Latin words, necro meaning dead. So when we don't deal with that context, I think being put in a dead state of existence, then therefore we're not operating in a creative space to try to move in the direction that you're professing, Mr. Fuller, becoming a universal man, a universal woman. Neither of those will be identified as white nor black. So how do you suggest, I guess is the question I'll lead up to hold because I can't hear the show for his response, is that without dealing with what I just described, the context of whiteness versus blackness, we can't see a way of moving progressively forward, including the participation of white people. Yourself has said. You said the dream of the black male is the white male anus. I won't take offense to it. It's an intriguing statement. But that's what I'm asking again today with my question, attacking the concept of whiteness versus blackness requires so-called black people to no longer be black. And thank you, Mr. Bobby.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Fuller, your response to that.
Well, I didn't understand it as a question, but we just need a code. If we give a broad answer or the answer, we would need a code that's designed to do what? Replace the system of white supremacy with the system of justice, which means the system of justice, if we're going to replace the system of white supremacy with, would be what? It would be guaranteeing that no person is mistreated. That's number one. And number two, guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. Just those two elements. And that equation should take everybody right where they should be, guaranteeing that no person is mistreated on a daily basis. That's how it's got to be done by each individual. In the workplace, like somebody alluded to earlier in the program, in the workplace with COVID-19, you say, well, wait a minute. This thing that we're fixing to do, is anybody going to get mistreated? See, put it in the form of a question. Put everything in the form of a question, because the answers will take everybody right where they should be. If you have enough questions and enough answers, that's a guarantee. You got to have enough questions and enough answers. So everybody lays out their proposal for this, that, and other. And you just say, okay. But now, after we do all of this, what is it we want to do? Why do we want to do it? How do we plan to do it? And then what do we expect the constructive result to be? You say, now, does that mean that somebody's going to get mistreated? Anybody have an answer to that question? Let's go around the table. Anybody have that? Is anybody going to get mistreated now in this thing that y'all planning? Because we can't go forward if somebody's going to get mistreated. No, I mean, that's going to make this one problem right after another, right after another, right after another. Endless problems. We already got that. We're trying to get rid of that. And then the other thing is the person who needs help the most going to get the most constructive help? Just those two elements, because that's the compensatory definition for justice. That's not the dictionary definition in most English-speaking dictionaries. That's one that I made up in 1994. Guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. In whatever it is you're doing, you got to have those two guarantees. Otherwise, you can't say that you have justice. And you got to do this in every area of activity. No such thing as justice in one thing and non-justice in another. Because if you got it in one thing, it's going to poison everything else. And you can just forget about it and everything else, because the whole thing falls apart. It's like a missing brick in a building. The whole building might come down because of that one missing brick.
All right.
That's why bricks are scientifically placed the way that they are. If you ever look at a wall, a brick wall or something like that, if it's not codified, you can say, hey, this wall is big, and it's got a lot of bricks in it, thousands of them. This thing is going to come down. Why? Because you don't have everything in the correct place. Or like going to the moon and back, everything had better be in the correct place. You got this one little thing out of place, that whole thing might just come apart, blow up in the air, like some of them have. Same way that anything works with what people do each and every day. We need a code for everything that's guaranteed to work.
John, I'm going to leave you on. and thank you for listening. Let's go to Sam in Colorado. Let's see here. There you go. Sam, you're on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
Good morning. I also want to stay on the line. Question. So, Mr. Fuller, you suggest that non-white and white people should not mate, right? Correct?
Should not do what?
Have sex, have sexual intercourse with each other.
White people and non-white people should not have sexual intercourse. Is that what you said?
Okay. Yes.
That's exactly what the codified suggestion is in the system of white supremacy. Now, if there were no system of racism, then it would just be boy meets girl, as they use a cliche saying, flippant saying, and of no consequence. But since when you mix black with white, and this is where many white people have a great fear, you're going to get something other than white when it comes to producing an offspring. Now, this bothers a lot of white people to the nth degree. It terrifies them. And we can sit down and talk about that, all right? But the first order of business is you don't need a system of white supremacy in order to have white people be genetically continuous, because that's what white people have claimed. Some of them have said that outright, particularly in the old days. They don't say it much now. They'll say, well, if you keep mixing black people with white people, you get to the place where you don't have any more white people, because black is dominant. That black gene is dominant. And you mix black with white, you're going to get something other than white. And that's been proven over and over again. And a lot of white people find out that this is not only terrifying, but it's not the natural order of things. So what they're basically saying, you're wiping out a species, and every species serves a purpose. So you don't want to do that. So that's something to be considered. I've always said that right from the beginning. A lot of black people say, well, so what? But a lot of black people say, so what about just about everything? But, it's something to be considered. You say, well, yeah, you're going to get something. You're going to get brown or tan or yellow, but you're not going to get white. You keep mixing black with white, you're not going to get white. That doesn't come up white. Every now and then you'll get an albino, just like black people produce albinos. All right, white comes from black. Okay, so the whole universe, most of the universe is black. Okay, so anything that shows up like light in black, the light is a Johnny-come-lately. And so they say, yeah, but the two go together. Absolutely. But in balance. But you got to have white in order to have black. You can't have shadows unless you got white. And then you have shadows. I mean, that's just the opposite. So it's something to be considered. And that's why, and black people should be willing to talk about it. It's a subject that everybody evades when it's the core of a whole lot of the animosity and anxiousness. And actually, among white people, it's terrifying to many white people throughout the entire world. So you get all these black people in here and they start having sexual intercourse with white people and white women particularly. That Negro putting his phallus into a white woman and planting his seed there, you ain't going to get nobody white. And the next thing you know, all my grandchildren going to look like a whole bunch of them. And they ain't going to look like me. And that's terrifying to white people. But here, even in 2021, we do not talk about that as being one of the most terrifying things to the white people of this planet. And we need to talk about it and say, hey, we can work this out so that just doesn't happen. And in answer to the question, I'm saying, hey, we can just put all that on hold for the time being and straighten out all the rest of this mess. We can agree that black people and white people not have sexual intercourse and certainly not produce no offspring, as long as we are having all of this fuss about everything else, housing, health care, and all like that. We can go along with that. We don't necessarily just have to be in bed with you. That's not, we might want to and long to. We've been taught to. We've been taught, hey, get in bed with somebody white, or you ain't got nothing going for you. I mean, you have arrived if you're black and you're in bed with somebody white, particularly a black male with a white female, white legs going up in there. Oh, boy, you're in heaven. That's how I was taught.
Got to get to this, Mr.
Goldilocks and Cinderella and everybody who's pretty is white. And you got black people all over Africa trying to whiten their skins and whatnot when they get around a few white people, okay? And this has always been. But we need to stop that insanity and say, hey, let's get right down to the nitty-gritty, as they say, and straighten this mess out right now, here in 2021. I mean, forever. Let's get this straight. I mean, and stop hiding it and feeling anxious about it and all this and uptight about it. And that's in the way of progress. That's in the way of doing everything that needs to be done that is of constructive value. This sex thing, this thing about white people turning black, is that what's in the way? Well, we'll straighten this out right now. I mean, in the next 5 minutes, we're straight. They've been hanging on forever. People have been hung on trees about it forever. And so we should stop being modest about it and say, hey, this is a huge issue. Let's get it straight right now. And so the code says, just stop it. Hey, I'm not getting in bed with you. That's out. Forget about that. Now let's move to step 2. Housing, education, going to the moon, whatever. Clean up the rivers. See into it that everybody got enough food. We don't have all these people burning on some bridge on the kind of somebody's and talking about sending them back where they come from because somebody is scared that somebody's going to get in bed with somebody. No. Let's talk about that in the high schools, everywhere. Yeah, junior prom comes around. I mean, yeah, there ain't going to be no bedroom stuff here in the junior year. White with black in bed. No, terrifies white people. So we'll just get that straight. Talk about it. Talk about it. Talk about it. I mean, don't back up. Everybody getting all uptight. That's a bunch of nonsense.
Let's talk about this, Mr. Fuller. Thank you, Sam. Mr. Fuller, we have 4 minutes before this hour is over with, so we need to get to your book. So please take it over.
The book talks about all of this, the 8th area of activity. It talks about it and talks about it and talks about it, about this sex thing. That's the 8th area of activity. Sex is the next most powerful thing to the system of white supremacy itself on this planet among the people of the known universe. Sex is a huge motivating factor. So in any situation, you always want the sex thing to be taken into consideration immediately. The Boy Scouts of America is falling apart behind what? Sexual accusations, little boys being abused, all kinds of big money being paid out. So the textbook for victims of white supremacy is about straightening out all problems between people. The race problem is the biggest problem. And the sex problem is a huge part of the race problem. And it needs to be addressed. You can get the textbook for victims of racism by going to producejustice.com. There's 9 areas of activity in there: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. And that's just a lot of people say, well, I should have added health. Well, if you have a healthy society in those 9 areas of activity, you got health. If you've got, in economics, if you have a healthy economic system, which we don't have, a healthy educational system, which we don't have health like it ought to be in any of these areas of activity. So if you get all of these areas of activity the way that they should be, and people doing the things on a daily basis as individual people, like the code recommends and suggests, then everybody in the whole world will be what we are called, what I say, is just right now a fantasy, but it can be made real, a universal man and a universal woman. People who always do the correct thing without fail. That's what we should be aiming for. You can get the textbook for victims of white supremacy, which is you got to get rid of white supremacy in order to do this, and replace it with a system of justice. That's just the beginning. And that'll be on the path to universal man and universal woman. That's the next phase. And you can get the book by going to producejustice.com. That's producejustice.com.
Thank you, Mr. Fuller. We're going to have, coming up in the next hour as we conclude the first hour, we're going to have Damon from Cincinnati, Ray from Dallas, Swa from L.A. is going to be in the house. Got a question from Rita 888, and also from Daryl. We're going to have all that and more of your questions coming up. Thank you for listening, though. We really appreciate that, and hope that you will not be a stranger as we try to improve, try to get better, and we effort that on every program. Don't forget that Mr. Fuller and I do not rehearse this show. It is completely unrehearsed. Some will like it, some won't, but that's just the way that it is. But we do try to get much better. So thank you for listening, and stay tuned for the second hour of the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. right here on Blog Talk Radio and ProduceJustice.com. Alrighty, welcome back to the second hour of the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. To get in contact with the show, just simply call 516-453-9921. Be sure to press the number 1 button and you will get in line. You can also Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com, and you will get in that line also. Chat room is available, and some of the chats will be read. Some of them will not. Most of them will be not, but there's some interesting chats that are going on in there. So let's get kicking with the second hour of the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. All right, thank you for listening. Mr. Fuller, we made this announcement in the first hour, but for those who are just tuning in, for the second hour, you're going to be on another show this week, Thursday. Could you make mention of that, please, before we proceed?
That's WOL Radio, Dr. Kathy Hughes Station, WOL Radio, 1450 AM, 95.9 FM. WOL Radio from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Thursday, September 23rd. That's day after tomorrow. This is Tuesday. The Carl Nelson Show, WOL Radio, 2 hours of the code. That's how he announced it. That's how he, Mr. Carl Nelson, announces it on his program. He just, in order for people to just get what it's about, and it'll be me. He's the host, and he'll have people call in and ask questions, or he'll ask questions, just like on this program. But it's under the banner of just simply the code. So that's WL Radio, 1450 AM, or 95.9 FM, Thursday, the 23rd, 2021, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Okay, let's do this. Ooh, I said a bad word. I said okay. Listen, this is from Transcendent and also Rita 888. I think this will encompass your question. The question is, Mr. Fuller, from Transcendent and Rita 888, I'm going to put you in this also since you asked a similar question. If the male white anus is the holy grail for black males, what is the status of the white female? Is she the holy grail too?
No, the holy, I call it the holy wand. That's what the phallus of the white male ultimately is going to be, like the white supremacists always wanted, the dominant phallus on the planet. So, you start with the white anus. It's where you deposit your black seed. That's where they're sharing everything, doing it indirectly, starting off, first of all, with the black people themselves, with each other. And then they graduate, just like when we're moving up in the world, hey, we got the black anus. We learn a whole lot about that when we're locked up in prisons. That's where a lot of it starts, whatnot, going way back, all down through the years. All kind of books have been written about it. Okay, so, and everybody knows about it who knows anything about prisons all over the world. That's what winds up happening. And then you wind up, and just like in the hierarchy of anything, people what they call want to get ahead. So in the world of sex, you say, okay, if I'm into anuses, and that's where I like to put my phallus. So you've got the black phallus and the black anus, all right, and then the AIDS and all like that. You get that out of the way and push that aside, which is nothing. AIDS is just a warning that maybe this is not the best way to handle sexual organs. But if you just insist, maybe we'll kind of give you something that will impede that, even when you are with the female, if you do it in a certain way, you get gonorrhea and syphilis and all like that. See, so these are just little warnings, like the ship's firing a warning shot across your bow. I mean, that's what diseases are for. You might be doing something going in the incorrect direction. And so, but, people being intelligent and knowing how to do stuff, you can overrule that. So just like they overruled syphilis and gonorrhea, and just kept right on, fornicate all over the place. And they doing the same thing when AIDS came around as a result of males putting their phalluses in the anuses of other males, and that's where they say it came from. All right. Some say otherwise, but I don't know. But it's a pretty good indication that it could be. And so, all right, but you can manipulate it and cure it or hold it at bay and whatnot, and just keep on doing it. And, and parade around and have flags and whatnot. Okay. And if you're black and we're a black male in the hierarchy of the system of white supremacy, okay, now I got to move up in the world. So I'm going from the black male anus to the white male anus. Oh, now I'm graduating now. I'm in the senior class. I'm moving on up. This is deluxe, okay? And then naturally you say, well, now what else do I do? I'm with this black male, white male. I'm a black male with a white male in a bed. We're both naked. What else that I can find to do here to express my love? Okay. Well, he's got a phallus, so I got to do something with that. Okay. So, we get through going through the anus thing. So, hey, the white sperm, produces some substance. The white phallus got some substance in it that goes into the white female or the black female or females all over the world, lots of it, okay? And they spread their seed. So, hey, I'm a black male, so I can get my nourishment, And you got what you call oral nourishment now. Okay, so I'm gonna get some of this white nourishment. I'm gonna get to some of this white seed. Fill my belly up with it. Oh boy, ain't that wonderful? That's food. Okay, food of the future. I'm afraid of them down the street and brag about it. And the white supremacist said, "Yeah, now you're on the right track, boy. Yeah, you're coming on up in the world. Just keep at it. Let me steer you in that direction." So the white male phallus, in answer to the question, is the magic wand, you might say, the ultimate. And it's the white female vagina that's the holy grail of all vaginas, because black vaginas are obsolete here in 2021, according to the white supremacists. Hey, you want to fill them things up with cement and never put nothing in them except cement or something to clog them up. Don't let them produce no more of this black stuff called black babies, this throwaway stuff that doesn't matter, okay? We got too much of this coming out of the black womb, too many black babies. If you can't have white ones coming out, and that ain't likely, because when you mix black with white, you're going to always, for the most part, get something other than white. So we can't depend on albinos. Even when you get an albino, you got to have that albino be classified as non-white, even though the albino is white, but the albino ain't white. So we're confusing ourselves. We can't have that kind of confusion among the white mind. So therefore, it's just best just to seal up the black vagina. The black vagina is obsolete, okay? And so, what are the black women going to do? If their vaginas become obsolete, the black vagina is obsolete. It's not good for nothing. It's no longer something that anybody aspires to, or black males want. White males don't want it. It ain't good for nothing. Yeah, but black people are good for something. That Black Lives Matter. The white supremacists agree with that. A lot of them march right along with you. Say, well, here's what. We're going to match up these black females with either other black females or white females and put them in the Army and Navy and all the military forces, because we got a whole lot of fighting out here that we're going to be doing in the future, particularly with all these non-white people that keep coming down the pike. And we're going to have, we got to send a bunch of them here and a bunch of them there. And it's cheap at the price. Plus, they're not producing no more black babies. See, they adopt a dog. Okay. See, the white supremacists got this all figured out for the next umpteenth centuries.
Yes, sir.
According to their plan. That's the plan as far as black sexuality is concerned. They got a plan for white sexuality, got a plan for black sexuality, and that's where it's headed in answer to the question. That's
right,
why
let's hear...
whiteness is still the holy grail of everything sexual. And black sexuality is supposed to be distorted, contorted, put out of business.
From the Gmail, Mr. Fuller, you've been vaccinated, and that's your prerogative like it is anyone's. However, we got some black folk out here, especially black celebrities, who are leading the way in shamming other black people for choosing not to get vaccinated. Those black people who've chosen not to get vaccinated are being blamed for the spread in the coronavirus cases and blamed for being susceptible to so-called online misinformation. All of this has led to another national divide within black families, such as it has with which team you're a fan of, if you're a Democrat or Republican, Christian or Muslim, light-skinned or dark-skinned. And not just among black people, but people in general. In my mind, it's another white supremacist distraction by weaponizing the vaccine to do so. So, Mr. Fuller, my question then to you is, if you've noticed this as well, what is your reaction to this, and what then would you propose to black people in particular about how not to get caught up in this shamming and blame game over who took the vaccine or who didn't? Daryl, thank you.
First of all, you don't blame black people for anything that black people do. Black people are led by the white supremacists. And they will lead this bunch of black people to do this and say this and see that, and then they'll go over to the other bunch, because they put us in bunches, because they keep conflict going, because conflict comes from what? Confusion. So we start confusion. Rwanda, that's confusion. Black people hacking each other to death. Black gangs, teenagers running around all over Washington, D.C., killing each other. That's confusion, engineered by the white supremacists, directly and indirectly. That's where all those ideas come from. Video games and whatnot, that's all it is, manifesting itself. So it's the same thing when it comes to sex or anything connected with it. All areas of activity or diseases, all areas of activity cause what? Confusion. So, in the code book it says, many people are being harmed who should not be harmed. This will apply to every situation under the system of white supremacy. There's 4 things that's in the code book itself. Many people have been harmed who should not be harmed, because no people should be harmed, if they're doing the correct thing. All right? Many people are being harmed who should not be harmed. Number 2, many people are to blame, including black people. Number 3, the people who are most to blame are hiding in plain sight. And number 4, the people who are most to blame are all white supremacists. So anything you see black people doing that doesn't make sense, or that causes confusion, or that causes some type of harm, is under the white supremacists. Because that's what white supremacy means. The warden of the prison or the captain of the ship is always to blame for whatever goes on in the prison or whatever goes on that ship. And the whole universe is a ship, a slave ship, for the black people who are in the universe, in the system of white supremacy. And the white supremacists, racist man and racist woman, are to blame for the conduct of everybody on that ship. So if black people are doing anything that is not constructive, which is what black people usually do, supposed to do anything constructive ever, according to the white supremacists, until the white supremacists come around and make them do something that is constructive. That's what the system of white supremacy is designed to do, that black people will never do anything of constructive value among themselves. We'll be permanently non-constructive people in the system of white supremacy. And the only time black people show some signs of doing anything that makes sense is when a white person in the form of a white supremacist shows up with a whip and makes them do something constructive. But the minute that black person is given what you call free time, that black person is never supposed to be doing anything that makes sense.
Thank you, Daryl.
That's the essence of white supremacy itself.
Thank you, Daryl, for your question. Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. We're going to Cincinnati, and Damon, you are now on the program. There you go, Damon. You're on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question, please?
How you doing, Mr. Bobby? Mr. Fuller, good morning.
Good, sir.
Mm-hmm. I have a brother of mine who, like many of our brothers, they date outside their race. But the question keeps coming up: what is white supremacy? I try to explain it to him in the way the code is written in the book, the way Mr. Fuller explains it to him. But is there a way, almost in layman's, and I know we almost can't speak in layman's, but is there another way that I can explain to Mr. Fuller to simplify it? Because he's explained it to me, I'm being blackballed, some people, by black people, as opposed to being blackballed by white people, as if that's something, he's making it seem as if more opportunity and more advantages are in the person and in the individual, as opposed to it being something as opposed to like white supremacy.
Okay, Mr. Fuller?
I don't understand that question at all.
Damon, could you just simplify it real quick so Mr. Fuller can understand it and answer it, please, sir?
What is white supremacy in simplest form?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fuller.
Well, if I understand the general question, if a white person or a black person doesn't understand what you're saying, you don't ever want that to happen. So just hand them the book and tell them to look through it, and maybe they'll understand something about what you're saying. If you have a copy of the book, and you're willing to let them see it or something like that, or have them get it and say, well, it looks like I can't explain what is being said, or I'm not explaining it in such a way that you know what I'm talking about. Because when you're trying to explain something to anybody, the law of compensation says that if they don't understand what you're saying, you find the best venue or the best vehicle that you know about, or, that can explain it. That's why I wrote the book. So that, you just tell them, well, look, I'm trying to talk to you. You don't seem to understand what I'm saying. Are you willing to look at a book and to get some idea? Just finger through it, not have to read the whole book or nothing like that. Just finger through it and see if you see anything that makes sense to you. And then we can talk about it later. And just hand it to them. If you're willing to lend it to them, you have that type of interaction where you can trust them with it, white or non-white. It's available for everybody. I want everybody to look at it. That's why I wrote it, because I have problems explaining, just like on this program. Sometimes I'm pretty sure I cause more confusion than I clear up, trying to do what I do, because that's just the way things are. I'm not very skilled at what I'm trying to do. If I was what you call completely skilled, And what I'm trying to do, we wouldn't even be having these conversations because the race problem would be over.
Yes, sir.
The race problem would be over if I had the skills that I ought to have. Okay? So nobody has come up with a formula for solving this problem. Why? Because the problem hasn't been solved. We're all just struggling, trying.
Ray from Dallas, you are, and if I can get you in here. Ray from Dallas, you are on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question, please?
Yes, sir. I have two if time permits. Number one, Mr. Fuller, is it logical for victims of racism to invest in purchasing land when the white supremacists intend on keeping squatters moving through eminent domain?
Is it logical for what?
Is it logical for victims of racism to still invest in purchasing land when the white supremacists intend on keeping squatters moving through eminent domain?
If you know that's what's going to happen. But see, you don't know that's what's going to happen. That's just it. Always think of every black person on this planet here in the year 2021 as a prisoner of war. And you have the power that a prisoner of war has. So you look at movies or anything like that or read books about what is a prisoner of war and what does a prisoner of war actually do and how much power does a prisoner of war actually have. So everything that I have seen, a prisoner of war power that a prisoner of war has, which is just about none. You can't predict anything. You can't make a plan for anything that you can guarantee is going to work because you're a prisoner of war. And every black person on the planet in the system of white supremacy, if it's true, and the code book says it is true, is a prisoner of the system of white supremacy, which is a prison system. So, and it's a war system. War was declared against the non-white people of this planet by some white people who decided to be white supremacists, and they have so far been winning that war. And they have made the non-white people of this entire planet into prisoners of war. Everybody who's black, brown, red, and yellow. And so we're completely dependent on the wardens, quote unquote, or the masters of that prison. So in answer to the question, the white supremacists can make you move anytime they want to. So every move that you make, it's not a guarantee that the move that you made is going to be the one that will last, because you can't determine that.
Second question quickly, Raymond. Ray, we're up against the clock. Go ahead, please.
Yes, sir. Is begging the white supremacists to stop practicing white supremacy tantamount to attempting to expose victims to a code in order to dissolve white supremacy?
Oh, we will all beg us. Here again, I think of myself every day as a prisoner of war. Prisoners of war have to beg. Now, begging has been given a terrible name because the white supremacists just don't want to be bothered, all right, with doing what they should be doing. But when black people get ready to do anything, you got to beg. And there are black people who will criticize other black people, saying, "Well, you know, we're gonna be beggars." No, we ain't no beggars. We are great people. We built the pyramids. Yeah. Yeah. We're all beggars. That's what we have been reduced to. If we were anything at all in the past, that's all in the past. And whomever it was in the past didn't mind the store. We need to think about that when we start talking about history. They made huge mistakes. So don't glorify anything. That's why the code says, don't glorify nothing about black people's past. You talk about it, you catalog it, you record it, you report it, you analyze it. But black people have nothing to brag about. Why? Because look where we are now. Whatever we were doing then was full of flaws. Because when something is not flawless, we don't wind up in the shape that we're winding up in. So whatever we were doing had a bunch of flaws in it. It was set up to fail. The white supremacists so far have not failed. Their operations have been virtually flawless. That's why they're the most powerful people on the planet. So black people should not be glorifying anything and trying to come up with a code for the first time in the history of the universe that will make the universe the type of place it ought to be.
Got to leave it there, Mr. Fuller. As we come up on our last break here, thank you all for listening. And keep in mind that you are listening to the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. In the remaining last segment that we have, if you would like to get in, and if we can get you in, the number to call is 516-453-9921. And if you have a question, make sure you press the number 1 button. Because we are on a time constraint, and I'm looking at the clock in the upper left-hand corner that is counting down, I would ask sir, that you just ask one question, and please make it short so we can try to clear the board if we can do that. And if you'd like to stay on the line also, let me know so that I don't click you off. If I do click you off, it's surely by accident. You can also Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com. It will not be read today, but on another program it could possibly be read. You can also get in the chat room, and for the 5th straight week, if you get in there, you will see that they are really blowing this thing up. Rita 88888 is just blasting all over the place. Very good. People from, my man from Madagascar is in the house. Swa, who we're getting ready to get on the air, he's in there. It's just outstanding, the conversations that are going on in there, and sometimes I am able to get a question out from there. Black Tony, I don't think I'm going to be able to get to you today, but I will make every effort to get that. But you are listening to the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. Okay, we're going to go way out to L.A. My brother has a book club, and people have been asking about that. Swa, I'm going to get you in here. Go ahead, my brother. You're there.
Grand Rising, Mr. Bobby. Grand Rising, Mr. Neely Fuller. My question is, Mr. Neely Fuller, why is the greatest act of racial aggression that a white person can commit against a non-white person, taking that person to the bedroom? Why is that? Why do you believe that's the greatest act of racial aggression?
Greatest act of racial aggression is what?
Mm-hmm.
Is what?
A white person taking a non-white person to the bedroom.
I talked about this in the early hour. Because
and I wonder why do you believe that?
Sex is the greatest motivating force among people, period. Among creatures. I mean, those salmon, that's trying to fight their way up in that waterfall. You've seen nature programs on television and seen them in magazines and also in books about fish. They are going to what? What are they? Hey, they're trying to swim up. Here's a waterfall, and you got fish trying to swim up against the force of the waterfall. A waterfall is pretty powerful. All right? And here you have some fish trying to swim against all of that power. And some of them making it and some of them not, and some of them giving up, but most of them, over the period of centuries, thousands of years maybe, have been able to make it. And make it, what, to the top of the waterfall? Well, what are they doing that for? Trying to get where? To a spawning ground. And birds fly thousands of miles, going to a place where it's what you call the mating season. And they compete with each other about the strongest mates that they can find. The females are waiting, because they want the next generation to be strong and able to survive. They sense that is the order of things, that is what they should be doing. Creatures do things, okay? And one of the main things people do, people are creatures, and all other creatures, bugs, squirrels, birds, fish, is mate. The movies are made mostly about mating, okay? So the white supremacists said, if we don't control how people mate among our subject peoples, the non-white people of this planet will be out of business. So all of their sexual urges must be controlled under the system of white supremacy. We just can't let that just go just any kind of old way. No, we got to be very meticulous about how we let that evolve. It's the strongest motivating force. That urge to interact sexually with something or somebody is there. A powerful motivating force dominates. It's the center. I mean, there are millionaires that get in trouble, billionaires wind up in jail because somehow their sexual thing got into the legal system, and they were doing things in a certain way. Entertainers, football players. Hey, you worked hard to do this and do that and do this, and then somehow you got involved in some type of sexual thing that destroyed everything overnight that you have been working for year after year, sweating for, planning for, getting together with groups and whatnot and thinking long range, and then overnight something that has to do with sex got you in all of this trouble that you're in. So sex is a very powerful thing. The white supremacists understand that. So in answer to the question, yes, they say we're going to control every move that a black person on this planet makes when it comes to sex. We are going to control it. And we're going to do it in such a way they're not going to even know that we're doing it. And that's whichever way you're going. Whether it's male with male, female with female, whether it's male with female, you better believe we're going to control that, all of it. But like in everything else, we're going to do it in such a manner that they're not going to know. They're going to think that these are all their ideas. That's how we're going to do it. And they have done it and have been doing it. They have to do it.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Swaz, for listening. Hey, Swaz, you're still having those meetings discussing Neely Fuller's book? Is that correct?
We're currently on Race Code War. We will be covering Neely Fuller's book again probably next year. But we're on Race Code War by Tyler and Harrows.
And anybody that wants
and tomorrow we're having a discussion on Everett.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Anybody wants to listen to that? How could they listen to that again?
We covered the entire book, cover to cover, and all of those discussions are on YouTube at Countering RWS Book Club.
Okay, thank you, Swell. Somebody had asked me about that, and I said I would ask you. Okay, thank you very much, Swell. And you know the deal. Don't be a stranger. I'm gonna keep you on here. Okay, thank you very much. Let's go to Joanna. Let me see if I can get you in here. Oh, from your state, your home state, Mr. Fuller. Joanna from Oklahoma, if I got it correctly. Is that you?
Yes, it's me.
Okay, go ahead.
So my question is, I've been studying the code and learning about white supremacy. As I'm learning and understanding, it's becoming overwhelming and quite depressing. So my question is, how do you continue to move on without becoming inundated with depression and just how to continue to fight knowing the situation?
First step toward solving any problem is to know what the problem is. Going to the moon seemed overwhelming for the first person that looked at the moon. I don't know when that was. I'm quite sure that whomever was here when the moon was the first there. The moon wasn't always there, I understand. Some people say millions of years ago, trillions of years ago. But the moon became the moon at some point. And then the earth became the earth at some point. And then people became populating the earth at some point. At one point, so some books say, including the Bible, I understand, that the earth once didn't have any people, period. So they appeared. And some of those people looked up and saw something called the moon. Moon probably wasn't always there. But over a period of millions of years, the moon appeared. So somebody asked a logical question. Everything starts with a question. What is that? What is that? And many years ago, I saw sort of a cartoon movie about primitive people climbing the top of a mountain, thinking that they got to the top of the mountain, that they take a hop from the top of the mountain to the moon. Because why? They were at the bottom of the mountain, and the mountain went way up in the air, and the moon was behind the mountain from them looking at it, and it looks like maybe if you got to the top of that mountain, you can reach out and touch the moon. You might be able to just, get on a vine or something and swing over there and see what's up there. So people were climbing mountains trying to get to the moon till they got to the top of the mountain, and they saw that the moon was still quite some distance away. They didn't know how far. They just know that, hey, from the bottom it looked like that moon was sitting right on top of the mountain. That's how it looked to me. When I got here, boy, that moon is way away from here. Now, how am I going to get there? Because I want to go there. I want to check it out. So they finally gave up. And then finally they kept looking at it. Seemed like it was always there. So a lot of them started worshiping the moon. Started putting it on flags and all that. And, of course, the sun was always there. Okay? A lot of people were worshiping the sun before then. And then they started worshiping the moon. Okay? And then, a lot of people were writing songs about the stars and whatnot. So these are all, to make the point, get to the point, finally, I'm finally getting to it. It's the same way with this so-called overwhelming problem. Now, people didn't make the moon, as far as I know. Nobody on the planet has claimed to do that I know about. That was put here by whatever created people, presumably. Okay? Same force. So whatever people do in the form of a problem, now this is the logic. People can solve it. If people make a problem, people can solve that problem that was made. The system of racism was invented by people. That's something that's made up by people right here on this planet. So whatever people do, if you use the logic, if people make a problem, people can solve the problem made, but you have to know how that problem was put together, how that problem became a problem. You have to analyze it. Same way, the reason I'm making the people solving a problem here on Earth and talking about the moon is because at one time it was impossible to get to the moon, to answer the latest question. But anything that people do, people can solve. Any problem that people make, people can solve. It's just a matter of having the patience and gaining the knowledge and understanding of what the problem is, how it's put together, and you can solve the problem of race. The same way that somebody solved the problem after millions of years of how to get to the moon. John F. Kennedy said, everybody keeps writing songs to the moon. I mean, everybody looking up at the moon, and everybody's fascinated by the moon, and walking hand in hand, looking up at the moon, and writing poems about the moon. Let's go up there and check it out. And everybody said, John Kennedy said that? The president? Is he losing his mind? He's what you call, see, the moon is sometimes associated with a word called lunar. They say, yeah, he's a lunatic. Okay? A lot of people said that. I just kind of brushed it off myself as that, oh, well, lots of people said, they're going to the moon. Frank Sinatra sings about that, we're going to the moon. Yeah, that's a fantasy. That ain't going to happen. John Kennedy said, watch my smoke. See, in other words, you figure out how to do something, and it can be done.
Okay.
Because all you got to do is just figure out how to do it. I'm saying having a code is not overwhelming for eliminating something that's sophomoric, something that's juvenile, you might say, as a system of white supremacy. It's just a matter of figuring out how it's put together, and so you take it apart. The same way that you can put up a tall building, you know how it's put together, you can bring that building down in an orderly fashion, and you can do the system of white supremacy the same way and replace it with something better, and that something better would be justice. So, bottom line, that's why I wrote the book. If I thought it was impossible to get rid of racism, you don't despair. Yeah, people looked at the moon and despaired. Before we even got to the moon, people said, hey, I put these wings on a bicycle and it didn't work. Somebody did that, actually did that, put wings on a bicycle, and it didn't work. But after they kept at it and kept at it and kept at it, next thing you know, you got something a whole lot bigger than a bicycle flying through the air.
Yes.
And the lady who's calling, she's probably been on one of them at some time or another. But somebody started by putting wings on a bicycle, and that didn't go nowhere. But the next thing that they did, it worked a little better, and then a little better, and a little better. It's the same way with solving the race problem.
Yes.
Don't get overwhelmed, because it's not overwhelming. It can be done.
Joanne, did you understand the logic behind the analogy that he used?
I did.
Good.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for calling in. Do not be a stranger. Thank you so much, Joanne. Mr. Fuller, while we have this time, because we have about 14 minutes, go ahead and speak briefly about your book, and then we're going to resume our calls that we have. Go ahead, Mr. Fuller.
Well, the space vehicle, you might say, the launching pad for solving the race problem is in the form of the textbook for victims of white supremacy. As far as I'm concerned, this is what I'm doing, because when I set out, I didn't set out just to solve a few problems of my own, but I said the race problem is just like any other problem. It's a problem to be solved, and you put your mind to it, you can solve it. So I put my mind to solving the race problem. I finally decided, I said, Fuller, what are you doing? What are you actually doing? You keep working on this. You keep writing stuff and writing stuff and writing stuff, walking around with a big orange suitcase with, finally got so full that you had to put a belt around it. And that's how my book was at one time. It was just a whole bunch of pages and whatnot. And I'm sorting through them every now and then, trying to find which page did this and which page said that. And so that I talk about it at meetings to people. So I put it in the form of a book, textbook for victims of white supremacy, which is what I am. And I decided I'm going to try to solve the race problem with one book. That's where I am now in 2021. I'm trying to solve the race problem with one book. I say one problem, one book. Why not? That's the logic. I say, if everything is done that's in this book, the problem is solved. That's what I wrote it for. Now, have I done that? I've written the book. But have I solved the problem? No. Nobody has. But just like that bicycle with wings in somebody's garage, somebody's going to make a person fly. That's what I'm doing with this book, but I'm trying to do the whole thing. I'm trying to do that biggest aircraft that you got in the air now. That's where I'm going with this, I hope. Solving the race problem. I'm most likely will fail, but I'm going to give it my best effort. And you can get the textbook for victims of white supremacy that's supposed to be designed to help the individual person solve the race problem by going to producejustice.com.
Okay, producejustice.com. Where did the white...
By the things that you do and say each and every day, this is what this book is supposed to do. Help each and every person who is black on the planet solve the race problem. Him or herself, without asking nobody nothing.
Thank you, Mr.
All right?
Fuller.
Just check the book and follow the instructions in the book.
Okay. Terrence, you're on with Mr. Fuller. Go ahead, please.
Hey, good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Fuller. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning, sir.
I'm trying to learn.
Good. I'm going to be real quick. I know Mr. Fuller grew up on a farm. I'm here in Tennessee. I grew up on a farm. And I remember chickens, when we would chase them and run around, they could fly. And they would fly into trees, and we couldn't catch them. Turkeys could fly. And then as chickens became domesticated, they lost that code or whatever was created in them to fly. And my question to you, Mr. Fuller, is white supremacy an act against the Creator, removing his codes and constructive codes and replacing them with non-constructive codes so that we how to do the things that we should do?
Absolutely. See, the question is white supremacy, should white supremacy exist? A lot of white people say it should. But then you look at it and you say, but it harms people. See, that's the key right there. And it's based on a whole bunch of lies, okay? They lie all the time. They don't tell the truth. They oppose the truth. and they say that this is the way things should be. And the question is, well, should it? Maybe it should, but let's examine it. This thing called white supremacy. What does it actually do? Well, it glorifies doing harm to people. That's what it does. Now, in the process, we have to tell the truth about it. No system among people in recorded history, from what I've heard and what I've seen, is more progressive in producing material things. The system of white supremacy is a wonderful system in the production of things. More things have been produced that are useful and helpful to people and animals and creatures in recorded history, as far as I know, that's more efficient than the system of white supremacy. So that being the case, why isn't it, why would anybody want to oppose it? Getting things done, solving problems. The system of white supremacy is a problem solver when it comes to what? Things. But it is a huge problem maker when it comes to what? People. And people, if you can produce a whole lot of things, but you are destroying people by the millions in the process, that's a flawed system and should be opposed tenaciously by everybody, white and non-white. The system of white supremacy we should all admit, oh yeah, you can put up big buildings, you can fly through the air, you can go to the moon, you can do a whole bunch of things in the system of white supremacy. Nothing invented in the minds of people as far as how you get things done has been more powerful than the system of white supremacy. No system that has come before that. Nothing compares with it. Curing diseases and all like that. Having people to do this and do that, just like the caller said. But it also makes people weak in interacting with each other in a constructive fashion. It makes things stronger. It makes people weaker, weak-minded, so that we worship doing harm to other people. The system of white supremacy, all the movies that are made and whatnot, all about doing harm and glorifying it and looking forward to it. Oh, got to see this next blockbuster movie. Well, what is the movie about? Oh, well, some people traveling in outer space. Oh, people traveling in outer space. Okay, so far so good. And what are they traveling for? Well, they're going to fight the green people up there or the purple people. Oh, the extension of racism. That's what you're talking about. That's what this blockbuster movie, the sequel to it, and the sequel to that, and the sequel to that, every year. And then fill up the television sets with it. And then glorifying guns, instruments of death. Gotta have a gun, gotta have a gun, gotta have a gun, gotta have a gun. In every scene, in every movie, where's the gun? Where's the gun? Where are the soldiers? Where are the people wearing guns? One on each hip, another one on their shoulder, another one in their hand. Bullets all around, wrapped around your neck. Oh boy, bullets for what? Killing. Killing what? Killing people. Preferably dark people. People with color in their skin. They make excellent targets for every gun ever made. Get with it, boy.
Yes.
This is the modern world, and we want more of it. And we want to extend it to other planets. Now, that's what you don't want.
Yes. Okay, I'll tell you what. I'll say that bad word again. Okay, listen, Stan the man in Pennsylvania and Willie, I do not have enough time to justify putting you on, but I'll tell you what. When you call back next week, we will put you at the head of the line no matter how many people are there. My producers, they can see your numbers, and so can I. So we'll put you there. We just simply have run out of time because, as you well know, I'm on a clock schedule here that is counting down even as I am speaking. So, again, thank you all for listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. We appreciate you, Mr. Fuller. We appreciate you. And in the last few moments, as we and as you have talked about ProduceJustice.com, we give you the last 2 minutes, and then we will end the program. Go ahead, Mr. Fuller.
Well, we just need to go to the textbook. That's an excellent start. And when you talk to people, talk about something that's in the book, whether they want to hear it or not. And if they don't want to hear it, ask them. Always go to page 171 and 172 in the textbook. That's in there. In every conversation. And it will always, the answers to those 4 questions will always take people where they should be. That's a guarantee. If you try it, you will find out it always works. When you get frustrated, like one lady called in, she gets overwhelmed. Just go to page 171, 172, and ask people those 4 questions, starting with yourself. And it will always take everybody right where they should be. It won't take everybody where they want to be. But you keep asking those questions and getting the answers to those 4 questions, just starting with those. Always go back to them. If you get lost, go back to those 4 questions. Those, it has to do with wants. Wanting things, wanting to do something is something that dominates the entire planet. For everybody, it applies to everybody. Babies want to do something, even when from the minute they're born. So go to get the textbook for victims of white supremacy.
Righty. I'd like to thank you
ProduceJustice.com.
I'd like to thank everyone for listening, in particular those in the chat room, 888 Rita or Rita 888 Produce 21. Still learning, be good. Still learning 2 and be good 1, I believe that is. You really carried the conversation in the chat room. I'd like to thank you. For all those that Gmailed me, I appreciate that. Didn't get a chance to read many of them today, Daryl. Thank you. Mr. Johnson, we'll try to get you next week. Don't forget Stan and Willie. We'll try to make sure that we get you on. And that person in the 334, you didn't put your name in there, so I don't know who that is. But if you call in, we'll get you in there too. Don't forget that these talks that Mr. Fuller and I have are simply unrehearsed. We don't call each other and say we're going to do this and that. It's raw. It's the way that it is because we're both still learning. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Thank you, callers. We will try to do well. I will try to do better next week. So thanks for listening. Thank you, producers. Thank you, everybody. Mr. Fuller?
Me too.
All righty. Everybody have a good week. Still learning. Be constructive.
Still learning.